The world is focused on the coronavirus crisis, but did you know that there may actually be 50 times more COVID-19 cases that have been reported so far? Believe it or not, that is some great news. Joining me now from his hideout in Jamaica is serial tech entrepreneur and CEO of ClickUp, Zeb Evans, who's here to talk about this and how world leaders likely way overreacted to the virus and what we can do to take action now and get our economy back on track.
And we are joined today by a very special guest. This guest is not only a serial entrepreneur, he's also been doing tons of research into the coronavirus and has some of his own insights that are a bit alternative that he's here to share today. Here we are with Zeb Evans, the CEO and founder of ClickUp, one of the world's top productivity platforms, and he is actually live from his hideout in Jamaica. Zeb, welcome to Crave News.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Excited to have you here. So let's just get straight into this. Right now, we're seeing that the initial coronavirus models, which predicted millions and millions of deaths, those things just aren't true. You've been doing a lot of research on this. You've said that you think the initial projections for deaths and other fatality rates and all of that stuff is basically overstated by several orders of magnitude. Could you kind of explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to preface this exact same thing happened with H1N1. Several years ago, we thought H1N1 was 18 to 20% death rate. And the reason why that and this correlates to extreme exaggeration in death rates is that we're taking the number of confirmed cases and combining that for a ratio with the number of confirmed deaths, right? But actual flu measures of death rates are based on estimated, because nobody gets tested for the flu when you have the flu unless you're dying, right? Unless you're going to a hospital and getting testing. That same thing holds true for coronavirus, is that even today, when you're getting coronavirus, they're telling you to stay home. There's no reason to go outside and go get tested. So that same thing holds true, is that it's this confirmation bias. We're only testing the people that are more likely to die from it anyway. And that's really the basis of why the death rates are astronomically exaggerated.
And not to mention the fact that especially in places like Italy, and I think in a lot of places in the United States, fatalities are actually overstated because they're measuring what's referred to as comorbidity, in the sense that if you had, an underlying heart condition or asthma or something that was probably going to kill you anyways, and you got coronavirus, that tips you right over the edge, but it wasn't necessarily coronavirus that killed you.
Exactly. And that's even more evident in New York. The data that came out 2 days ago is showing that 50% of those deaths that were reported were actually not confirmed coronavirus cases at all. And when you combine that with other charts that are showing the deaths during the past 2 weeks of flu and pneumonia, heart disease, those have all dropped. They've bottomed out to pretty much none. So we're counting all of those people that are dying from these other conditions, and we're lumping them into this coronavirus bucket. And frankly, a lot of it is to pad the data a little bit to make it not look like we were so wrong. Maybe we're just a little bit wrong, but I mean, truly, we're wrong by orders of magnitude. And some of these famous epidemiologists, Ferguson, for example, British, he predicted, he was the first one that really had these models that people in the news media was validating. And he said that he took into account social distancing, and he's repeatedly updated his models. And now we're talking orders of magnitude lower than what it was originally, and it's still astronomically high. But he keeps updating them and then blames social distancing for why he was so wrong.
I'm going to be devil's advocate here for a little bit. There's a lot of people who are going to come out, especially a lot of politicians on both sides, are going to say, yeah, the shutdown has totally destroyed our economy. It may put us into another Great Depression for basically something that we did to ourselves, but we saved millions of lives by doing that. How would you respond to an argument like that?
Yeah, the side of this is that we are killing way more people than we are saving by doing this. The unfortunate reality is that these people that are dying most likely would have died anyway, very soon in the near future. 99.8% of people in New York had one or more major pre-existing condition, by the way, which they classify as cancer and similar diseases. And, if you're under 44, 2 or more pre-existing conditions, right? So these, unfortunately, it's horrible, but these people would have died anyway in the near future, whether it be the flu or something else. So it's a fact of life that this does happen. and we have to deal with it. My argument is that we can deal with it in a much better way. We could have isolated the people that we know that are susceptible to death from coronavirus. And we also could have taken, even just that $2 trillion that we just had to spend on our stimulus, that for our self-inflicted disaster that we created, we could have built 10,000 hospitals with that amount of money. 10,000 hospitals. We only have 5,000 hospitals in the United States. So we could have tripled the amount of our hospitals, and we not only would have been prepared for this virus, we would have been prepared for any virus in the future with that amount of money. So we could have saved, we're talking hundreds of millions more people over the course of many years by allocating that money to resources that actually would have done something.
We've also seen a lot of different scary stuff out here, whether it's the quarantine or all sorts of other things. If you were to, let's just say you were President Zeb Evans of the United States and you were in charge of this, how would you have gone about stopping this?
Well, first of all, we need to be crystal clear on data, and whether it's accurate or inaccurate should always be at the top of everyone's mind. We shouldn't just get models and assume that they're accurate. So we should have been more reactive to this, unfortunately, than proactive. And as we get data, you need to change. We need to admit that when we're wrong, and by all accounts, we were very, very wrong. So I would have personally taken the stance of let's still leave it up to the states. But let's not enforce or add any policies until we're 100% sure of what we're doing. To be clear, there could have been a very bad disease, right, that is spreading rapidly that we do need to prepare for and we do need to shut down the world for. This wasn't that. This certainly was not that. So it's a great lesson in preparation, and we could use this lesson, and that's what I would have done, is use this lesson to prepare more. But I would have taken a back seat on this, and let this truly kind of play out. And we're talking 10,000, 15,000 may end up being higher, up to 50,000 deaths in the United States, but that's just suicides, right? We're not even taking into account domestic violence from children, which is even skyrocketing. 12 children deaths in Texas alone from domestic violence. And these kids are not even susceptible at all to coronavirus, period. And we're scaring people into thinking that they are.
How much of the need for a total shutdown was because the United States was just woefully unprepared in terms of ventilators, masks, and all the other things we needed? Because if we look at a lot of other Asian countries over there, like Singapore and other places like that, they're pretty much over coronavirus. They were able to just give everyone masks, contain it, hospitalize the people that were needed to, and leave it at that. If we were prepared, how much better would we be off right now?
Well, one thing is true, that if we had shut down our flights, that would have certainly limited the spread of this, for sure. There is no doubt about that. And whatever side you're on, you can't really disagree with that. And frankly, the WHO was completely wrong. They were completely wrong about us not shutting down flights. And that's what Singapore did, right? That's what Singapore did that day one, pretty much. It said nobody in or out. That's what we're going to do. But to be clear, Singapore will have problems. Everybody that doesn't have problems today will have problems. This is not going away. It will come back over and over and over again. And that's the biggest risk right now, is when we reopen everything, it's going to come back. And then we may end up, doubling down on these restrictions. Like, we need to be honest with people and explain that this is part of life, unfortunately part of life, and that this is not the thing to really shut the world down over.
Yeah, nobody has a crystal ball, least of which the world leaders that are trying to solve this right now. But if you were to take your best guess, how do you see this ending?
Yeah, look, there's a couple ways of it going right now. We reopen things and we deal with this, and we continue reopening things, or it's you go in the opposite path. And, unfortunately, what is going to happen is that this is going to spread again, and we may end up going in that opposite path of talking complete lockdown. I actually believe that way more people have coronavirus than we know. And I think that many people are asymptomatic. There's several studies that are showing that now. The homelessness study is shocking. It's truly shocking that we're talking of these samples, 60, 70% of people have coronavirus and didn't even know. They were pretty much asymptomatic. So when you have these actual controls that you're able to test, and we also, by the way, think that, much of California had already been infected. We had a really bad flu season there. And I think that was coronavirus. It wasn't the flu season. So if that's in our favor, meaning that, a majority or so of people that have already had it, then that means, we're somewhat immune to it and it won't spread as fast as we think it's going to be. And that would be the best case scenario, I think, that happens, is we open things up and we're fine.
Yeah. A lot of people on both sides of the aisle, both on the left and the right, they're concerned about the crackdown on basic civil liberties, not just here in the United States, but around the world. You have people, big tech companies saying that they could track phones to potentially prevent coronavirus spread. You have all sorts of other surveillance that we're probably not knowing about, as well as, restrictions on freedom of association and movement and your right to run a business and all these sorts of things. Which ones are most terrifying to you?
I mean, frankly, they're all draconian and dystopian. It is horrible that even our country has been able to implement some of the policies that it has. I mean, they're entirely unconstitutional. Some people are upset. We're starting to see some protests, and then the government shuts them down. I mean, how ironic is that? That we're not allowing people to protest anymore because of it not being an essential activity. So what are we going to do in the future, right? That's not the point that I think people miss, is that we don't need to think about right now. It may not be that bad right now as far as what government is doing, but this sets precedents for the future. And for the future, what will happen is we will take what we've done now to an order of magnitude, and exactly like you're talking about, and like other countries are already doing, we're going to use this as an end to track everybody's cell phone. And it may not matter, again, even for the next one. We are using it for good purposes. You have to think 20, 30, 50 years in advance as to what happens when government has access to all of our cell phones. Every disaster we have used to just increase government power, and this is no different.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very similar too in the war theater. So many technologies that are developed for military use, they're then 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, sometimes 5 years later used to suppress citizens around the world. And it's certainly a scary thing, especially with China, seemingly being on the rise globally over this. Let's talk about the future. So how do you see the world changing when this is over? Certainly global trade will be changed. How technology is used will be changed. There's going to be so many different things. From your perspective, which things do you think are going to change the most? And how's that going to affect average Americans?
I am still optimistic that we're going to have a reckoning for the medical profession and the medical community coming out and kind of just nullifying what happened as an overreaction. I'm still very hopeful on that. And that's what happened with H1N1. To the medical community's credit, that's exactly what happened. We thought there was a few-month period where we thought death rates were skyrocketing just like this. We were scared of it just like this. The difference is we didn't have social media back then, really. Nearly to the extent that we have today. We didn't have that, and that's amplified the hysteria. We talk about overwhelming hospitals. When you look at the data, when those hospitals were overwhelmed, there are certainly anomalies, like New York was an anomaly. But really, elsewhere, it was overwhelmingly because of people being scared. Everybody thought originally that if I get coronavirus, I'm going to die. Like, that's what you thought. And people didn't even understand that, it pretty much does not affect young people and even old people that don't have pre-existing conditions. It doesn't affect. Like, that's what we're seeing right now. So I think we're going to continue seeing that. And I'm optimistic that it will actually help us prepare in the future for something that does happen that's wrong, but also give us better precedents to say, let's take this day by day, let's look at the data, and let's just not trust everything that's being put out, because there's people that have different intentions other than just helping people. As far as the negative effects that will happen, that are already done, it's the economy, right? The economy is the big thing, and the economy does affect the rest of the world. Here in Jamaica, people are truly dying. They are dying from famine. They are dying. People are fishing all day and all night here. And we're trying to help as many people as we can, but it's impossible because there is no tourism on this island anymore. And this is truly where, it is a place that relies on our economy. And there's many of those like that. So the point that I'm worried about truly is the economy and what happens, what we get from pumping trillions and trillions of dollars now into our primary economy. I mean, we're going to most likely experience a period of hyperinflation, and there's a very rough couple of years to come if we don't bounce back really quickly.
Since World War II, it's been Pax Americana, as I call it, American peace worldwide, because our military is everywhere. We generally keep things stable, and we are the international standard for how things are done. That's been changing for a long time as China has risen over the past 20 years. It is changing at an even faster rate because of this. Do you think that this event could possibly upend the United States' dominance on the global stage? And if so, what can we do to prevent that from happening?
I certainly think it could be a catalyst into some of that. I think that this is the event to do it right now. I don't. The reality is that China does rely on us. Majority of their economy still is built kind of on the backbone of trading with us. So it's not, it's beneficial for us to still work together for sure. There are problems, and I think that those are going to be exacerbated right now, and we're going to focus more on that. And this is going to become a blame game. No doubt, it's going to become a blame game, and it already has. CCP is blaming us for this and saying that that there's no way we could have had a cure for this, a vaccine for this, in the amount of time that we did. How some of these companies are already starting to see that. And on the other sense, we're saying, hey, we warned you about this a couple years ago in your lab, and you didn't do anything about it. So to answer your question, I think we're going to be in somewhat of the same boat that we were in prior to this. I don't think that this catalyst will change much. Now, if the economy, we do have truly a dollar crisis, meaning you have hyperinflation because of the Fed easing and the monetary policies, then we may have a problem where if China stops buying our bonds, then we're screwed. Frankly, we're screwed, and we will have a dollar crisis. But I don't think that this.
Do you think that this whole coronavirus saga? Do you think that's going to change Americans' attitude towards China, as well as corporations' attitudes, as well as politicians? Like, do you think there's going to be any movement on how people talk about China, or recognizing the problems that sometimes emanate from there that end up making us look bad? What do you think about that?
It depends on how this plays out. If this plays out as we pretty much know factually that a couple of the scientists died, and their families entertained the idea that they were killed or they've gone missing by the CC.
They've been disappeared. They've been
disappeared. Yeah. So we pretty much know what's happened there. If that ends up relating to the reality that this was a virus within their laboratory, whether it was created by them or whether it was an accident that was released there, then I think that will change attitudes for sure. And I think that we're going to not trust the government nearly as much as some people do today. Of course, if you really know Chinese politics, and people living in China will tell you this, you can't trust the government. But really outside of that, people still kind of take it for the face value. So I think that's what would change for the most part.
Yeah. Zeb Evans, the CEO and founder of ClickUp, live to us from his hideout in Jamaica. Zeb, thank you so much for joining us. Please come back again here on Crave News.
Thanks for having me, Peter.